Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why hip hinging exercises are really the best way to build a deadlift. And when I say that, I'm not saying that your squatting and squat accessories don't carry over. I'm not saying that your upper back work doesn't matter, that the rows and pull-ups and stuff don't, because a lot of that, the rows and the pull-ups, they do build the support musculature to give you a more efficient pull, right? They give you a more efficient pull. But the point is, even if those things aren't present, if you're just strong enough, you can kind of grind your way through a pull that isn't efficient, right? In other words, if your hip hinging muscles are big enough and strong enough, you can still just force your way through bad bar mechanics and a less than ideal bar path. Now, that being said, obviously you're going to lift a little more weight if you can maintain an ideal bar path and have strong lats, strong traps, all those things to, maintain the best bar path, to hold the bar in tighter with the isometric strength of the upper and middle back, right? I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter, because it does. But it's not your primary movers. Now, we could also make the case for quads with breaking it off the floor, but if you're doing any squat and lead work already, you probably have that covered. So what is it that really builds our deadlift? It's going to be hip hinging. Now, for a lot of people, and in many cases, me for certain phases, your deadlift can go up just by doing deadlifts. And when I'm talking about hip hinging, what I'm saying is building the musculature to deadlift, right? Building the musculature to deadlift. Because a deadlift is a hip hinge. We could argue that the conventional deadlift uses more muscle than any other hip hinge, because it does. It really does. However, the point is, a lot of that extra musculature is not necessarily worked through a full range of motion, and isn't always optimal for hypertrophying it, but it can hypertrophy it, right? It can, because there's still a lot of stress to be had through those partial ranges of motion and isometrics. But the hip hinge muscles are what move us to the full range of motion. So again, all the muscles involved with hip extension, right? All the muscles involved with hip extension, which can be glutes, hamstrings, certain parts of the quad, the adductor, right? So these are all part of it. And all these muscles are built effectively with hip hinging. So a lot of it could just be deadlifts and deadlift variations. You could do conventional deadlifts. But I'm always going to say, for most people, if you really want to get good at anything, you're going to need to do at least 2 different exercises for a given muscle or set of muscles, if we want to optimize it. So, what are our other options to add besides the deadlift? Well, I think good mornings are up near the top of that list. A lot of people will say, well, Romanian deadlifts and so on. And I will agree, Romanian deadlifts can be good for many people here. I have a special place in my heart for good mornings, and always have. Mainly because they carry over to your squatting so much also. They're such a versatile tool, particularly if I have access to different bars, different ways to do them. They bring so much to the table. So, good mornings. And I think good mornings are really our premier tool here as a secondary exercise to build our deadlift. And it's because we can do different bars to change the emphasis. We can do them off pins, slings, whatever we need to do, right? Whatever we need to do to get the training response we want. They're like the Swiss Army knife of hip hinges, right? They really are. And we're going to always use slightly less weight than some of these other lifts, any way you break it down. Okay, so good mornings near the top of the list. But I do think Romanian deadlifts have their place. I like stiff leg deadlifts also. So if we're going to look at other variations to use, stiff leg deadlifts, they can be fantastic here. Particularly if you need to reduce stress because you can't handle the volumes of conventional pulling. Stiff leg deadlifts, you're going to be forced to use a little less weight. You're just pulling the quads out of the movement, really. All we're doing is pulling the quads out of the movement, so that we use less leg drive and we use a little more hamstring. But it forces us to use a lighter weight, so they're a phenomenal tool. How about reverse hyperextensions? Again, if you want something that you need to throw in that's easy on recovery, helps with recovery potentially. I think reverse hyperextensions absolutely have their place here. Absolutely have a place here. And I think they have a very, very good place here. Okay, so all these different hip hinges. This is really, I think, the key to building a big deadlift. Now, again, what I want to state here, it doesn't mean the upper back doesn't matter. It doesn't mean quads don't matter. It's just that they're of secondary importance. You know, if you get strong enough, those are weak links that will not necessarily completely set you back. They'll basically let you fine tune your deadlift. In other words, you know, if you're really weak off the floor, you struggle breaking a weight off the floor, the first few inches, right? You stick right there. All right, quads will help you. Absolutely. Quads will help you. Again, if the bar swings too far forward, you're fishing poling it too much on the way up. Traps, lats, stuff like that will help you. But you know, a lot of those things get built with deadlifts, don't they? They get built with deadlifts. But, you know, that's where rowing comes in. That's where pull-ups and chin-ups come in, things like that. They'll help you tremendously. Also, the grip training end of a lot of those. Yeah, the grip training absolutely can help. It can be a very valuable tool there. And there's no denying that. So, you know, as far as even quad work goes, your squats can work, belt squats, leg presses, single leg exercises, that stuff can all be helpful. But again, those things are never going to build the base of your deadlift, right? They're not going to build the really big numbers. They're just going to help you, you know, and their potential weak points that might need to be addressed. But they're never going to build the brute strength itself of the deadlift, because the deadlift is a hip hinge, which uses a lot of musculature. And, you know, that's the other thing. You know, so many people want to look at the squat as, you know, a deadlift accessory, whereas, and here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to take this a different direction and say maybe hip hinging itself, and including deadlifts, is a better squat accessory than a squat is to a deadlift accessory. Why? Because there's a squat to hip hinge continuum, right? The squat hip hinge continuum. And when you pull the quads out of the equation, right, or if you use less knee bend, the squat is really a hip hinge. And hip hinging can help you through weak links on the squat that are not quad related. Okay, so the hip hinging, again, is critical. Hip hinging and hip extension is such an enormous part of our strength training. And again, I'm not saying a lot of people can't build most of that with just deadlifts themselves, because you certainly can. But you need to have a heavy focus on hip hinges to help build both a squat and a deadlift, ideally, particularly if we're going to power squat. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.